All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is 2 o'clock, or just a little bit after 2 o'clock, downtown Austin. Show is coming to you live from our TRTA headquarters. It's great to see that you all are joining us as we get on board here. Normally, we have a fancy intro, but we have not had a chance to update that. We've been very busy with our legislative activities. We've got some other things that are exciting that's going on here with TRTA. I'm going to jump on those concepts in just a little bit. And I've got to make sure that I've clicked the right button so that I see. All right. I do see comments. So if you're tuning in to TRTA Live with us today, please go ahead and say hello, whichever platform you're using. So I see Veronica is here saying hello from Houston. I'm sure Houston is just as warm as it is here in Austin. So anyway, we're glad you're joining us this afternoon. Just a lot of updates with what's been happening. And, my producer, Roy, is with me this week, and he has reminded me that it takes a little bit of time for people to click the live button. So we'll just say hello to everybody as they come on board. I see Sandra from Roscoe. I see Alice. Linda is checking in from Alice. We have got Nancy checking in from El Paso. Susan or Suzanne. I can't. My eyes. I'm not using the right part of my glasses today, Roy. From Wiley, and we've got Cypress here. Sherry is here. All right. Well, just continue, please, to check in. I know that our updates have been covering a lot of the Social Security information that's been distributed out. I know that we've been covering a lot of our Texas legislative session. Last week, we really did spend some time talking about the Texas legislative session, and there was some action that from Friday until about Monday, it really prompted a lot of questions, a lot of activity by TRTA members, almost 8,500 emails or something more than that. I can't remember what Roy said a few minutes ago, but we had a lot of folks that were communicating with elected officials about an item that had popped up during the regular legislative session that dealt with funding of our teacher retirement system. So I spent a little time talking about that last week. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, and I'm going to talk about some of the good that came out of that. And I'm probably going to talk about some of it's not bad, it's just some things that we have to keep an eye on. So, and I see that Amy is here checking in from Washington, D.C. I spent a lot of time there. David is here from Hereford. Mary is here from Whitesboro. We've got Pearland here with Cindy. So again, y'all keep saying hi. I appreciate that. We're going to keep an eye on the comments, but if it's all right, I'm just going to go ahead and dive into the first item as really as an update for what transpired with the Texas legislature and an issue that really was on TRTA's radar for quite some time. Now, I could have pulled the video of the debate that occurred on a bill that was dealing with an issue about how much school districts contribute to the teacher retirement system, and there's a little disparity that's going on in the world of contributions. TRTA as an organization has pointed out for a number of years that there is a disparity on the level of additional contribution that is being made to TRS by the employers. And this issue is one that we have met with our budget writers on and leadership about, and we have raised this year after, session after session for at least, 3 or 4 sessions. It's been something that I've met with Senator Creighton on. I've met with Representative Chair Bonin about this. I've talked to Chair Huffman. We've talked to Lieutenant Governor staff, Speaker staff. It's just one of those things that is on the radar, and it continues to create a bit of a problem. But this session, it took on a little bit different twist. And so if you remember last Friday, we were gearing up for a bill that was going to be hitting the floor in the Texas House that was dealing with these employer contributions. So if you think about the contributions that are made to the teacher retirement system, and you think about the varied types of employers that are making contributions, there are a lot of caveats or differences that exist between these groups. But for the sake of argument, let's just say that there are three primary employers that make contributions for their staff to the teacher retirement system while our school teachers and school employees are working. We have probably the largest employer, which we'll just call traditional ISDs, the independent school districts, the traditional ISD. Okay. Then another group that we have talked about are universities. Universities have sometimes different retirement systems, like the University of Texas and Texas A&M and some others. They participate in something called UTIMCO, but some of their staff that work at those universities are not in the other plan. They are in TRS. And so those university employees have an employer contribution that is made on behalf of their employer. Then we have our friends at public charter schools. So if you take those three groups and you say, all right, these are the three main contributors to the retirement system: traditional ISDs, universities, and our public charter schools. So all of those employers have school employees, TRS contributors, that someday are going to retire and going to participate in the teacher retirement system. And we look at all of those groups as a contributing employer and employee. We look at all of those folks that are going to retire as pre-retirees. And our association is, we are experts on public policy matters related to the teacher retirement system. We have spent many years working on, or working with, I should say, the Texas legislature, our friends in the school community, our friends in the higher ed community, and legislative friends to try to implement plans that would ensure the TRS solvency. And one of the things that can concern us is if we are making a public policy decision that would impact the funding scenarios for our TRS. Because anytime you're affecting the funding scenarios, it's either you're going to put more money in and things are going to be good, or you're going to be taking money away and all of a sudden things go bad, because you have not only the cost of the dollars that you're losing when you're making that contribution, but you're also losing the compound interest over time that those contributions would represent. So if they're not there, not only do you not have the contribution, but you don't have the interest that you can earn on that money. And so while we say that something may have a dollar cost today, what the teacher retirement system will do is that if it's going to cost the system, $13 million in appropriation that's not going to be there today, and it doesn't have a plan, there's no plan by the legislature or some act of the legislature to keep that money coming in, they're just going to assume that they're not going to have that money going forward. So not only do they lose that amount of appropriation, they also lose the interest that's going to be earned on that appropriation over about a 30-year time horizon. It's kind of how they work on some of their actuarial projections. Now, I know some of my friends at TRS probably are watching this, and if Joe Newton from Gabriel Roeder and Smith, who manages the TRS actuarial analysis, he's probably banging his head, his forehead, saying, it's a very simplified way of looking at it. I agree. There's a more complex nature of these actuarial assessments, and I'm not trying to undercut, how important that science and that work is. But I'm just trying to give a general overview of how this works. So, years ago, the legislature and all of the other groups got together, and we worked on a bill that was going to improve the overall funded health of our teacher retirement system here in Texas. It's one of the best funded teacher retirement systems in the country. But at different times during the legislative process, there have been moments where we have worked on big bills with our friends in the employer community, the employee community, the retiree community, the legislative community, all of these groups with the stakeholders and the legislators, they come together and they try to fix what may be a long-term funding problem if there isn't a solution that's brought together. So, I got here in 2004. My first session was 2005. We called that session the Rule of Holes because TRS had a lot of practices that were costing us. They might have been great as potential perks for retirement, but nobody was paying for those things, and they represented a big cost long term. And it would have caused our system to, instead of bringing our funded status up, it was causing it to go way down. And so in 2005, we called that the Rule of Holes. And so when you're in a hole, you stop digging. And so we all got together and we passed some big changes, some big reforms, and we improved the actuarial health of the system. Years after that, there was another one of these great big conversations about how can we improve the financial health and the condition of the retirement system. And as part of that process, the legislature and the stakeholders representing the employers agreed that over a period of time, we would start seeing the employer contributions go up. And for those school districts that were not participating in Social Security, the part of this legislation said, hey, we're going to require for your school districts an additional contribution that is above what your regular contribution is to TRS. And so that contribution started as, again, kind of a stair-step approach. And affected, traditional ISDs, charters, but not higher ed. Higher ed has always been sort of removed from the idea of paying this additional cost to the retirement system. So fast forward a few more years, and TRS was doing better. Might have had some other, stresses on the retirement system, and so we all again got together with the legislature and said, that 2% employer contribution that is being paid by school districts, it is not really connected to anything related to Social Security. So some of you watching this program, you worked in a school district and may have worked in school districts your entire career where you paid into TRS, but that school district did not pay into the Social Security system. But then we have some other school districts here in Texas, like I'm here in downtown Austin right now. So Austin Independent School District years ago decided that they were, of course, going to have to pay the TRS cost, but for their employees that work there, they also pay the 6.2% employer share for Social Security, and the employees pay 6.2% contribution, and they are regular participants in the Social Security system by paying that 12.4%. So not only are they paying TRS, but they're also paying Social Security. And what was sort of argued back at when we changed this 2% was, hey, that's great that those school districts are doing it, but if you take Dripping Springs ISD, I'll pick on the one where I live, and Austin AISD, the TRS costs, the Dripping Springs ISD, by paying the 2%, they're actually paying more for the TRS cost for the same benefit that somebody at AISD or some other school district that may have been paying the Social Security, they're getting the same TRS benefit. So the argument was that all the school districts should pay the 2%, and that the public charter schools were also going to pay it. Again, higher ed still not involved in this 2% contribution. So kind of get to where we were last Friday. And I really understand and have had now a meeting with the Texas Public Charter School Association. I really enjoyed meeting with these folks. I consider this to be the silver lining of what transpired from about Friday of last week until about Monday of this week. I got to know the decision makers with the Texas Public Charter School Association, and we've had a very positive conversation, really a great dialogue. And so while this may have created, some I don't know, bruised feelings maybe in the legislature. The good that came out of it is that the bigger picture is a little more understood and more people are talking about it. But I'm going to break this down a little bit so that y'all understand kind of what was going on, because I got a lot of phone calls about this. So we have, for our school employees here in Texas, and many of you know this, we have something called the minimum salary schedule. And that applies to our traditional public school ISDs. There is no minimum salary schedule for employees in our public charter schools. The reason this is such an important part of this conversation is because a lot of our contributions are based on who's paying what on the minimum salary schedule. So if you think about the employee of a public charter school or a traditional ISD or a higher ed that's paying in a TRS, all of those folks are paying their 8.25% for the TRS cost on their total salary. So as an individual, there is an assessment of how much their TRS costs as a percentage, and that amount of money is taken out on their total salary. All right, so we know all of the employees are in the same bucket. They're all paying the same thing. But in the world of contributions for the employer share, there are shared contributions. Let's talk about public school employers for a second. That is a shared cost between the state of Texas and the school district. So the state will pay the 8.25% on the minimum salary schedule for all the Texas school employees. So whatever that is, whether that school employee is making, $10,000 more than the minimum salary schedule or not, the school district, the state is saying, we're going to pay 8.25% on the minimum salary schedule. Any amount of funding, any amount of salary that the employee of that school district makes above minimum salary schedule is going to fall to the school district itself as the employer to pay the other 8.25%. So we are getting all of the 8.25% on total salary. But the data shows us that as time has gone by and as school employees are making amounts higher than that minimum salary schedule, more of the total 8.25% cost is actually falling on the school district employer. So the further that employee or all of those employees get away from the minimum salary schedule, because that minimum salary schedule is pretty conservative. If you want to be able to keep and retain teachers, a lot of school districts are paying more than minimum salary schedule. And so they're paying the 8.25% on that minimum salary schedule. The state's paying the 8.25% on the minimum salary schedule. You add them together, it's 8.25% on total salary. All right. I know it's a little confusing, but it's important to kind of understand what was going on. Now, the Texas public charter schools, they don't have a minimum salary schedule. And a lot of their funding, and again, for those of you who probably understand this better than me, let me just, as I begin to make this comment, let me say that there's still some of this that I'm learning. And I'm not an expert on that right now, but I'm working to become more knowledgeable on it. But my understanding is that our Texas public charter school employers receive the bulk of their funding from the state, and that when they're looking at paying the 8.25% for their employees, those dollars are coming out of the direct appropriations that they receive to run their Texas public charter schools. They don't have other funding resources, the ability to levy taxes and that sort of thing. So they're paying the 8.25%, but there's no minimum salary schedule, and more of that funding is coming, directly from the appropriations that are allowing those Texas public charter schools to function. Okay, getting down to the real issue here. So you get to this 2%, and the 2% contribution is being applied to our traditional public schools, and it's being applied to our charter schools. but it's not being applied equally. And so what the Charter School Association was working with the legislature and trying to accomplish is that that Texas public school amount of 2% is not based on total salary. It's based on the minimum salary schedule. So we say that's a 2% additional appropriation to fund the teacher retirement system that is put onto the school district employers. That 2% is only 2% on the minimum salary schedule. So as I was saying earlier, more and more of an employee's salary is going above minimum salary schedule. But that 2% is only on that base level threshold of the total employee cost. It's minimum salary schedule. So 2% isn't a 2% on total salary. It's 2% on minimum salary schedule. And what the charter schools were saying is, hey, we at Texas Public Charter Schools are paying the full 2% on total salary. And we don't think that's entirely fair. We would like to have a percentage of additional contribution from TRS that looks more like what is the actual number that our Texas public ISDs are paying. So that sounds pretty fair. And I have a hard time arguing against that concept, save for this one thing that we all sort of found out when they put together the actuarial and fiscal impact statement on the bill that was being talked about in the legislature. And that is that the teacher retirement system has already assumed that the Texas public charter schools were going to be continuing to pay the 2% on that total salary amount. And so any change by reducing it would actually be a lower amount of revenue coming into TRS that they had already counted on, sort of, as we say, baked in the cake. And if you took that out, then you would have a situation where, yes, it might be fair to the charter schools to do it. Unfortunately, what that does is it creates a hole in the retirement system where you're losing the amount of current revenue and the interest that's going to be earned on that revenue for a long time. And that's why a $13 million annual cost turned into an $800 million actuarial cost. And there are a lot of things that I do in this business. And one of them that I try to do more than anything else is I want to be fair in understanding what people are saying, but also ensuring that we have had a chance to talk about these things, because we as an association took a position against the bill that would have reduced funding for TRS. And it wasn't that we didn't think that the charter schools didn't have a reason to want and ask for fairness. We also wanted to make sure that if there was going to be a reduction, that we find some way to not have an $800 million actuarial impact or a $13 million cash impact to TRS that created, a more difficult circumstance for all of the Texas public charter school employees that I want to be members of TRTA someday. And that when we're trying to improve their retirement benefits, that if we make a decision in 2025 that, 20 years down the road, we're still having to figure out how to deal with that decision and the fiscal impact. So that's what we were trying to do. And so the Charter School Association and TRTA, we met on Monday and started opening conversations about, we hadn't really talked. And I really want to extend, my appreciation to the folks at the Charter School Association. I don't know that I remember seeing, some of those folks around the Capitol, but they are not normally in the same committees that I'm in, and vice versa. So it's really a great opportunity for us to have that conversation. I learned a lot from that discussion. I think they learned some things from us too. The one thing that became apparent to the legislature, probably more than anything else, is that just this great disparity that exists between this contribution between our Texas public schools, our Texas public charter schools, and the fact that for several times now I've said higher ed is not paying this 2% at all. They're still not paying this 2%. And so during the debate, and again, I could have cut this for people to look at and see, but during the debate that occurred on Monday, we saw some things happen. Roy, it's probably go ahead. We can probably show these slides. So what transpired after TRTA members became engaged on this issue, and we started talking to legislators about it. So what transpired is that a state representative by the name of Jeff Berry, he offered an amendment to House Bill 3221. It revised some language in the bill that really focused on implementing this piece of legislation if it were to make it all the way through and become a law. And essentially what his amendment said was that beginning in 25-26 school year, this reduction in the Texas Public Charter School employer share for TRS would only occur if the $13 million was going to be provided for in the budget that is being negotiated at the Texas legislature. So that amendment was debated on the House floor, and it was argued that the $13 million cost that was being discussed was, it was not a big hit to TRS. Roy, let's go to the next slide. I'm going to see if, yeah, we'll come back to that slide in just a second. So you can come back on me, Roy, and we'll come back to that one in a second. Yeah, there you go. So what was discussed in the legislature is that, hey, this $13 million cost, it's not a big hit to TRS, and we should go ahead and pass this without the funding in the budget because it's not going to create a problem. That's an argument that I'd be more than happy to have with somebody, and I would always just continue to come back and say, hey, look, I understand that $13 million may not be a huge impact to TRS, but it is an $800 million overall impact actuarially to the trust fund. But the legislature went a little further in how they discussed this. So one of the other topics that kind of came up in this discussion is that, wait a second, all of this funding and how it's collected seems to be different between our Texas public schools, our Texas public charter schools, and higher ed. And if I were to look at another possible silver lining that came out of this conversation, it is that the legislature now plainly sees that we are not collecting contributions on total revenue. And there are a lot of different ways, to look at this. And I know that depending on if you're running the budgets of our Texas public schools, you probably don't want to have the legislature come in and say, hey, our Texas public charter schools are paying the full 2% on this employer cost. Why don't we have the full 2% employer cost for all employees in your district on total payroll? That's not something that they probably want to, talk about, because we're already, we all know how difficult the budget scenarios are for our Texas schools. So that cost to our ISDs would represent a significant financial hit. The other way to look at that is that our teacher retirement system is the entity that is absorbing that significant financial hit by not collecting the contribution on total payroll. Let me put that a different way. Would our teacher retirement system be better funded if we had the contribution on total payroll versus on minimum salary schedule? You better believe it. It would be a big infusion of additional sources of revenue. And it's one, again, that we've talked to our legislative friends about. My friends in the active community are probably, scratching their head and saying, I can't believe, that you guys would want to have that conversation while our schools are suffering. And I understand that. And I think that's why we have to be careful and quick to talk about these things, but also deliberative in how we get to the end result. But it could represent, tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars in more revenue for our TRS, which, again, whether you're, if you work in that school district, whether you're the budget person trying to figure out how to make the ends meet, or you're that classroom teacher, or you're the support personnel or a paraprofessional, and you retire under TRS, when you get on this other side of the equation where you want that TRS to be better funded because cost of living has gone through the roof, and we have a system that cannot be used to support a modest cost of living adjustment on a more regular basis, I promise you, because our members are here now, we would have really liked to have seen those contributions be going into the system so that we could have those resources available to help retirees. So that's, a big part of this conversation. And as I have said about 5 times now, there's simply no reason that I can think of. Now, maybe my team and maybe, some of the folks that will help talk to us about this, but I struggle very much after I've listened to all of this conversation to continue to say, if you work in higher ed and you are a TRS contributor, that your employer is not making some portion of contribution on that 2%, like our public charter schools and our Texas public schools do, you're getting a big discount on the cost of that retirement, but you get the same benefit, but it's coming at a reduced cost. And I think that when Stan Lambert, state representative, who's the chair of the pensions committee, provided his, vital words of wisdom on this conversation during the legislative time when they debated this amendment and this bill, he said that what we really need is an interim study that is going to look at all of these contribution factors. What do they represent in total dollars? How do you come up with greater parity or fairness? And then how do you ensure that TRS is not going to lose any of those necessary resources, but potentially could gain some more to help fund the retirement system? So, ultimately, Roy, put that slide back on and you can show people what happened. Ultimately, what occurred is the legislature voted on this amendment by Jeff Berry. We had 80 yeas and 63 nays, one present not voting. The adopted record number is just in the journal where it is, but it was the one amendment to House Bill 3221. And if you're watching this, or if you're rewatching this later on, you can freeze this and you can see, which members voted for it. Is a bipartisan group, 80 members that voted for it. We can flip to those who voted against it. So then you have, a number of folks that voted against it. I have contacted a lot of these state representatives. I sure would have rather they voted with the majority on this. It would have, I think, been a stronger signal that if we're going to do something that's going to cost the TRS some kind of appropriation, that if there's not a plan to backfill it, the legislature and the budget will be the payer of last resort. I think that's generally how this, this whole thing works. But I haven't gotten to all of these folks yet, but I have talked to quite a few. Roy, you can come off that slide. And, one of the folks that I talked to, really paraphrased by saying, hey, I want to do right by our charter schools. I want to do right by our public schools. I want to do right by our retirees. It happened real fast. But ultimately what we want is to ensure our pension system is funded and that we help all of our school employees and school employee retirees. So I think there's work here to do. And I spent a lot of time, Roy, I've spent 33 minutes talking about this. But the reason that I've done it is because it did represent a number of things that I think were important for the legislature to remember about this legislative session. First of all, we really have not spent a lot of time talking about any kind of benefit enhancement for retirees. As a matter of fact, last night, and part of the reason why I'm so casual today is that last night in the Texas House, there was a deadline that was met saying that if you had a bill on second reading and it was not passed from second reading out of the House yesterday, basically all of those bills died. So you have a lot of ideas that were in legislative draft form in the Texas House, including some concepts of how can we help retirees with a benefit enhancement, some COLA, some supplemental checks, something this session. And those bills did not advance this session. We are staying on course to protect our funding structures for TRS and TRS care. And we have made significant accomplishments in those areas. This legislative session has definitely been defined in large part around public school policy. And last night in the Senate, they were debating the school funding appropriations and how that's going to affect all of our active school personnel, school districts, pay raises for teachers, and so on. And so there is a great deal of work that is still going through the legislative process, and that is necessary work. And I hope that our legislative friends and our friends in the school community find ways to come to agreement on how best to use the resources to help our public schools. When we look at that discussion around TRS, we know that there are going to be things that are happening today that may have a material impact on the pension trust fund in the future, and maybe as soon as next session. And I think the legislature has signaled that while they do care absolutely about TRS, this session is one where they are just not focusing on it other than to say, we're going to ensure that our contribution levels are intact, which they are, and we appreciate. Our TRS care is funded and intact, and we appreciate that. And that they do have a sense of responsibility when it comes to making sure that our system is funded. And you saw that vote of more than 80 House members that said, hey, look, if we're going to take money away, whether it's fair or not, how are we going to handle this? We need to make sure there's going to be backfill, and so that TRS doesn't take that hit. So there's a lot going on. And as I said, there's a lot of, we're in that part of the legislative session where, people end up getting bruised a little bit. They don't like things that are maybe transpire a certain way. But, when this is over, TRTA members are going to have a lot of work to do. And some of that is going to be relationship management with members in the legislature, understanding where we're coming from, looking at different ideas that came up. I think that it would be a great idea, as Chair Lambert has indicated, to do some kind of study on whether or not this the idea of fairness on these contributions it should be done. I think there should be a study, which I don't think there will be because the bill did not advance to do it. I think there should be a study on how impactful or how much have retirees been impacted by inflation, how much of their TRS benefit has been improved because of what we did last session. But we'll go through this session without any benefit enhancements for retirees. And so that will set up a conversation in the next legislature about how do we ensure TRS is properly funded? How do we help those retirees that will continue to be dealing with inflationary pressure? And who knows what else may come up by the next legislative session. The markets could go way down. They could go way up. That's a roller coaster that none of us can predict. There's a lot that can transpire between now and the next legislative time. So for us as an organization, I think it's really important that members know that we have to be strong. We have to be consistent, and we have been consistent. We have made it very clear to the people that are responsible for budget writing that there are concerns that we have that are, way beyond, conversations about House Bill 3221. There were several bills that came up yesterday. There have been bills that we've been following. There are ideas that we have been promoting, and so on and so forth. We have been always consistent in our messaging, and it's important for our non-members to start looking at these scenarios and saying, yeah, that's tough. This business gets harder every session. There are so many new legislators. There's so many different ideas. There's so many different stakeholder organizations. Everybody is trying to get something accomplished in a short amount of time. You have to be as strong and as consistent and as visible as possible in this process. And I know that legislators believe that TRTA is strong, that we are consistent, and we are visible. And so we have to continue to build that connection in the Texas legislature. And so part of that process is unfolding now. And I think I mentioned last week that if you're a TRTA member and you would be so inclined to, connect with us and say, hey, I've got a story to share, and if my story can be turned into some kind of advertising component where we can reach out to these non-members and try to get them involved in our organization, my hope is that you'll share that with us. You can share that info at trta.org. I had a person write me this week that said the repeal of the weapon, the GPO, it's changed my life. And I've got a phone call to return to a member here in Austin who called and said that I received a big check, and you all really made this difference. The association made this difference for all these folks, and the stronger we are, the more we're able to do those things. And I really hope that people that are just sitting on the sidelines will hear that story and feel compelled to join our effort. As I said, these things are going to continue to get more challenging. We still have so many of our members that have not been helped. Even though weapon GPO have been repealed, it absolutely feels like that has stalled. Today, I reached out again to the Social Security Administration with the concerns that our members are sharing with me. Where is my benefit? Why am I only getting the 6 months when I should be getting the full 2 years retro payment? Why are we not getting quicker responses? Why should I have to wait until November? There's just so many questions that I think the Social Security Administration has left unanswered. And I am willing to absolutely give them the benefit of the doubt. But I've asked that the new Social Security Commissioner appear on our TRTA live show so that we can try to get some answers that you all still have. And, I had sent this email to a number of our members today and this week. I know many of you are struggling with what's going on with Social Security still. Some people have gotten their benefits done, and that's great. I'm so happy for that. I continue to say we will not leave anyone behind. I have made a bunch of calls this week. We had other legislative activities. Please continue to share your story, your concerns, your needs with us, tim@trta.org. Also, you can send those to info@trta.org. We continue to go through those stories. I look at your questions, your comments, but I know that the bulk of them kind of narrow into that area where I've not gotten my benefit, I've only gotten the 6 months, or I did pay my Medicare premium and I'm waiting for some kind of reimbursement. So we're working on those things. I'm going to probably do more of that now behind the scenes and continue to try to improve those things with direct member involvement. And TRTA is asking that the House Ways and Means Subcommittee on Social Security have a hearing on this issue to try and get to the bottom of when retirees that are waiting for their benefits will see them restored. I think there has been sufficient time for Social Security Administration to bring on the new commissioner and continue the implementation. I think it's time for some answers now. So that was a lot today. And really we're going to look at these comments a little bit and see what y'all are saying. Oh, we got Judy is checking in from San Diego. Beautiful, sunny San Diego. How are you doing, Judy? Don is here from Limestone County. Hello from League City. Let's see if we get some questions here. Comment about thank you for always putting retirees first. We appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. We always will. When I talk about retirees, I'm always also thinking about pre-retirees. So all of the 1 million+ school employees, our whole focus is making sure that when they retire, their benefits are going to be there and be able to be improved over time, just like we're working on today for our current retirees. Why do all the retirees receive? So, there's a question. Donna has asked a question. Why do all retirees receive? I think it may be, why don't we see all retirees receiving a COLA? Well, as all of you probably know, our TRS has no automatic cost of living adjustments built into it. The legislature has the sole power to authorize when retirees receive benefit enhancements. We have some provisos that are built into our TRS statutes and managing our retirement system that say if our system has a debt that is owed to the system in order to pay the benefits, we call that an unfunded liability. If that unfunded liability cannot be paid down with all things being equal and projecting what we know about contributions, investment earnings, and if that debt is not going to be able to be down to zero, in other words, our pension system is 100% funded within a 31-year period, we call that system not actuarially sound. So there's technical reasons for other parts about this, and that may be a little bit of a misnomer when we say it's not actuarially sound. It is actuarially sound, but from a statutory perspective, the statutes essentially say if you have a TRS debt that cannot be paid down within 31 years, the legislature is prohibited from approving any sort of benefit enhancement that would make that situation worse. Now, TRTA would argue that if the legislature wanted to give a supplemental check and they fully funded the cost of that supplemental check so that the actuarial condition of the retirement system wouldn't be any worse. If it was a 32-year funding and the cost of a 13th check for retirees is $1 billion and the legislature appropriated $1 billion to pay for it, our argument is that the statutes would allow for that because it does not make the actuarial condition of the system worse. Again, there could be legislators, offices watching this, or TRS maybe watching this, or other people will say, I don't know if that's the way it goes. But that's why we have lawyers, right? Everybody has an opportunity to express their position. So, but we don't have COLAs. We don't have traditional COLAs. And the legislature can only provide those when they have funding, when they have the political will, really, I think, in a legislative session to try to do it. And maybe a better way of saying political will is that like we had last session, $5.5 billion appropriated to help retirees, coming into this session, thinking that we might get another, $5 or $6 billion when there are a lot of other things that didn't get dealt with last session, like teacher pay and school district funding and all those kinds of things. You're not always going to be in a center position to try to get those things to happen. So the answer to the question is, like most answers, it's complicated. But the part about TRTA is we have to continue to work with legislators to find those opportunities and make those things happen. All right. So some of our retirees saying thank you. Here's my good friend Richard Briggs saying just got back from District 5 Spring Conference. And I'll say this to all of our retirees that are leaders in this organization. Thank you for being a leader. TRTA is a statewide organization. We have over 240 chapters. We have 20 districts. If you're watching this and you're in Texas and you're just starting your TRTA journey and you would like to learn more about being involved in TRTA leadership at the local level, which I'm sure they'd love to have you, at our district level or even at our state level, please contact us. Again, info at trta.org, and we'll help you get connected on your TRTA journey. I really hope that a lot of people are getting inspired by what we're able to do together and are getting involved in this organization and finding a new path to do something in our association. So, Richard Briggs, I'm so glad you're checking in. Okay, let's see. There's quite a few other, individualized questions that I'm seeing in our comments today. I'm going to take a look at those. Roy, what else do we need to cover in our show today? Did that cover just about all of the things that we were going to deal with?
Yeah, I think that covered a lot of what we had discussed coming up to this show. Did a great job of explaining a complicated subject. When we were writing about, for these inside lines, the MSS, the minimum salary schedule, oh boy, did my head spin. So, I can only imagine the viewers too. I had to reread some of those paragraphs 4 or 5 times just to wrap my head around the concepts. So I appreciate you being able to break down these complicated subjects for our viewers so that they can understand not only what happened, but why it's important to them, why it affects their retirement, and how it impacts TRS. So really good job on that.
Cool. Well, Roy, thank you so much for helping produce the show today. All of you that are watching the show, thank you so much. And, Roy, I've been watching these other social media presenters, and sometimes they got a really slick intro, or they got a really good ending. And a lot of times we talk about how, TRTA is the voice for all public education retirees. Roy, I'm thinking about making our kind of end phrase here for our show so that everybody knows it's kind of the end by saying, TRTA is working for you. So y'all, I appreciate it so much. Thanks for tuning in. TRTA is going to keep working for you. Have a great week, great weekend, and we will see you next Friday, same time, same place. Bye-bye.